Chapter 1. The girl from the Red Planet Day, the Central Galactic Academy, received the sealed diplomatic packet stamped with the sigil of Karis 9. The staff treated it the way one treats a box labeled fragile and live at the same time carefully, quietly and with a faint, embarrassed irritation that such things still existed in an age of controlled weather and negotiated borders. Karis 9 was not merely a remote world, not merely a developing civilization, not even merely an unpleasant place on the Academy's star maps. It was a classification, a warning, a gravity well of reputation. Category 5 Deathworld. Atmospheric volatility, seismic instability, megafaunal predation, seasonal radiation surges. A planet whose storms did not politely rotate around its oceans, but slammed sideways across continents like angry gods, whose deserts were not empty, but full of life that evolved armor and venom. Because softness was a death sentence, most member species had visited Karis 9 in suits, behind shields, during windows of relative calm, and returned with reports written in the language of scientists, who were trying not to sound like frightened children. And now Karis 9 wanted to send a student, a single adolescent, small, diplomatic, symbolic, into the most polished institution of civilization in the sector. The Academy's administrators told themselves this was progress, a triumph of cooperation, a neat ribbon tied around the ugly fact that galactic society still ranked worlds like food chains. They told themselves that a student was not a soldier, that a teenager was not a threat, that a school was a place where difference is melted into shared exams and shared cafeterias. They did not tell themselves the truth, which was that they were terrified of being embarrassed, and even more terrified of being wrong. Aaron Vale arrived in silence, not the dramatic silence of a march or a guarded procession, but the quiet, practical silence of someone used to conserving breath and attention. The shuttle that delivered her docked without ceremony. No banners, no welcoming committee. A staff member from Interstellar Student Services met her with a tablet and a rehearsed smile, and Aaron accepted the orientation packet as if she had accepted a ration bar. She was 17 by human measure, though the Academy did not use human metrics and would have preferred not to acknowledge the comparison. Her species carrion aged on a curve determined by harsh conditions and high gravity, mature in some ways earlier, in other ways later, molded by necessity rather than comfort. Aaron's build was lean but dense, as if her bones and muscles had been pressed and reforged by a planet that never stopped pushing down. Her skin held the warm, sun-burnished tone of people born under red skies and twin glare. Her hair cut short not for fashion but for function, and her eyes dark, alert, reflecting more light than most species, moved with the subtle rhythm of a predator scanning terrain. Even in a hallway that was perfectly safe, she wore the Academy uniform because it was required, but she wore it the way a veteran might wear a ceremonial coat, with the faint awareness that cloth did not stop claws. Her boots were the only personal statement she allowed herself, heavy, scuffed, reinforced along the toes and heel, built for ground that bit back. When the staff member asked if she needed help with her luggage, Aaron looked at the small case in her hand and simply said, "No." The word was polite. It was also final. The Academy itself was an architectural confession. Every corridor curved in gentle arcs to avoid sharp corners where fear could hide. Every wall was a composite that changed tint according to ambient light, soothing the eye. The air smelled faintly of clean water and engineered plants. Artificial gravity was set to a median standard, meant to accommodate the greatest number of species without strain, and the temperature drifted within a narrow band of comfort. Even the soundscape was curated: soft footfalls, distant ventilation, low murmurs, no sudden clanks, no harsh echoes. It was, by design, a world that did not surprise you. Aaron felt the differences in her body like a strange kind of intoxication. The gravity was light, so light it made her feel as though her joints had been unlatched, and her bones had forgotten their duty to carry weight. Her muscles wanted to move too quickly. Her steps, if uncorrected, would have launched her forward like a thrown tool. She slowed herself with deliberate control, the way one learns to speak softly in a room full of sleeping people. She was careful with doors. She was careful with railings. She kept her hands close, not touching anything unless she had to. Because even friendly objects could break if you treated them like you did on Keras 9. The staff member interpreted her restraint as nervousness and tried to comfort her with cheerful facts about the cafeteria's multi-biome menu and the library's holographic archive. Erin nodded at the appropriate moments, but her attention was elsewhere: on exits, on sightlines, on the way the ceiling panels would buckle if there was a pressure drop, on the locations of emergency seals. Habit is a language the body speaks without permission, and Aaron's body spoke Keras 9 fluently. If the academy staff were uneasy, the students were worse. They did not need to be told what Keras 9 was. They had grown up with the same popular documentaries and cautionary lectures. Deathworlders are unpredictable. Deathworlders are biologically extreme. Deathworlders have underdeveloped social refinement. Those phrases came dressed in pseudo-scientific neutrality, but the meaning was always the same. They are not like us, and not in a good way. In the main atrium, beneath a dome that projected a peaceful nebula across the ceiling, Erin became a moving distortion in the social fabric. Conversations dipped as she passed. Eyes tracked her, antennae angled, pupils narrowed. Some species leaned away instinctively, as if she carried spores. Others leaned in, hungry for spectacle. The apex students from Velar Prime, a species famous for being beautiful in the way daggers were beautiful, watched with cool amusement. They were tall, slender, luminous under certain wavelengths, their bioluminescent veins faintly visible beneath pale skin like delicate art. They moved as if gravity loved them. They smiled as if reality existed to applaud. The Academy's social hierarchy had many layers, but the Valarians lived near the top, not because they were physically strongest few apex species were, but because they were culturally dominant, politically connected, and skilled at turning every interaction into a performance where they always won. To them, Erin was not a fellow student. She was a new prop. The first incident was small, the kind of cruelty civilized people preferred because it came wrapped in plausible deniability. In her assigned dorm wing, an interspecies block designed to balance biomes and minimize conflict, Erin found her access panel unresponsive. The lock blinked, processed her credentials, and then displayed a polite error. User not recognized. Please contact administration. Behind her, a pair of Valarian students strolled past, glancing at the panel with theatrical surprise. "Oh dear," one said. "Perhaps Deathworlders aren't compatible with modern systems." The other laughed softly, a musical sound that somehow still carried insult. Erin studied the panel for a long moment. Then she turned, looked directly at them, and said, "If you wanted my room, you could have asked." The Valarians blinked, not expecting directness. One recovered with a wider smile. "We don't want your room," he said, voice smooth as oil. "We were simply passing." Erin nodded once. "Then keep passing." She did not raise her voice. She did not threaten. She simply stood there, still as stone, until their smiles thinned, and they moved on. After they left, Erin crouched and inspected the panel's casing. There was a micro scratch at the seam, a sign of tampering. She could have pried it open. She could have forced it. On Keras 9, breaking a lock was sometimes the difference between life and death. Here, she knew breaking a lock would become a story told about her for years. So she waited, and when the administrator arrived flustered and apologetic, Erin let them fix it without commentary. Restraint was not weakness. Restraint was strategy. In class, the real test began not from exams, but from the way information was framed. Xenocultural ethics was taught by Professor Marrakesh, a soft-bodied, amphibious scholar from a water world, whose entire civilization was built around consensus rituals and nonviolent conflict resolution. The professor believed sincerely in equality, but like many sincere believers, they carried biases disguised as curiosity. On Aaron's second day, during a discussion about primitive social structures, the professor projected images of Keras 9's early settlement, stone and metal shelters braced against storms, communal storage pits, watchtowers built with crude efficiency. "As we can see," Marrakesh said gently, "these societies formed around fear responses. Their culture emphasizes survival over art, competition over cooperation." Several students glanced at Erin with faint pity, as if she had crawled out of a cave yesterday. Erin raised her hand. The professor looked surprised. Yes, Erin. Erin stood. Careful not to move too quickly in the light gravity. That's inaccurate, she said. The room stiffened at the word. Students were allowed to disagree, but disagreement was supposed to be polite, wrapped in hedges. Erin did not hedge. Those towers aren't built for competition, she continued. They're built for warning. The storage pits are communal, because no one survives alone when harvest windows last 4 days and storms last 12. The shelters are reinforced because if one home collapses, the debris can kill the neighbors. Keras 9 doesn't teach fear, it teaches planning. She paused, scanning the room. Not aggressively, but in the way someone looks at people who might not understand something obvious. Our art is in our tools, she added. If your hammer breaks, you die. So we make hammers that last. We carve patterns into them, because beauty is how we remember who made them, and memory is how we stay alive. There was a silence that felt like a held breath. Professor Marrakesh blinked slowly, then nodded. Thank you, they said, voice quieter. That is important context. Some students looked away, embarrassed. Others looked at Erin with something new, irritation. She had broken the unspoken rule. She had refused to be the quiet Deathworld girl who nodded while others defined her. The Valarians noticed. They always noticed. In tactical theory, an elective course popular among apex species, who treated simulated warfare like chess, Erin scored in the top percentile. On her first simulation, the scenario was designed around a standard planetary defense, moderate gravity, predictable weather, limited predator interference. Most students approached it with elegant maneuvers and tidy lines. Erin approached it like someone who had lived through chaos. She distributed resources redundantly, built fallback positions, used terrain not as a board, but as a living hazard. And when the simulation introduced a random event, a storm, a landslide, a communications blackout, she adapted so quickly, it looked like she had predicted it. Her final move was not a heroic charge, but a controlled retreat that lured the opposing force into a canyon where a simulated seismic tremor collapsed the walls, trapping them without direct engagement. The instructor, a scarred veteran from a frontier species, stared at the results and muttered, almost to themselves, "That's not how the curriculum teaches it." Erin simply said, "That's how reality teaches it." A few students laughed nervously. The Valarians did not laugh. They exchanged glances that carried the private language of people used to being superior. This is inconvenient. By the end of the first week, rumors had formed the way weather forms around pressure systems. Some said Erin had killed predators with her bare hands. Some said she had grown up in a militia. Some said Deathworlders had instincts that made them incapable of empathy. None of it was fully true, and none of it mattered. What mattered was that Erin did not behave like the story they wanted her to be. She was not loud. She was not crude. She did not pick fights. She listened more than she spoke. When she spoke, she was direct. When she moved, she was controlled. That combination, restraint paired with capability, made people uncomfortable in a way brute aggression never did. You could predict a bully. You could not predict someone who remained calm under provocation. Erin's roommate assignment should have been neutral, but the Academy's allocation system treated her like a variable to be absorbed into normalcy. They paired her with Lumo Savari, a small avian-like student from a low-gravity garden world, chosen because Lumo's species was famously friendly and conflict-averse. Lumo greeted Erin with frantic kindness, feathers puffed in nervous enthusiasm, offering snack packs and explaining dorm etiquette at a pace that suggested fear disguised as friendliness. Erin accepted the snacks, listened, and then asked a simple question. "Do you feel safe here?" Lumo blinked. Of course, they chirped, confused. Erin nodded slowly. "Good," she said. "If that changes, tell me." Lumo laughed awkwardly. "It won't change." Erin did not argue. She simply placed her boots neatly by the door, aligned with the emergency exit route, and began unpacking her small case. Inside were not trophies or weapons, but items that spoke of a harsh world. A weathered multi-tool, a coil of high-tensile fiber line, a compact medical kit, and a small carved charm, a piece of red stone etched with a spiral pattern. Lumo watched with curiosity. "Is that religious?" they asked. Erin held the charm a moment. "No," she said. "It's a reminder." "Of what?" Lumo asked softly. Erin looked out the window at the academy's gentle lights. "That the ground can move," she replied. "And you still have to stand." The cafeteria was another arena, though most students pretended it wasn't. Food in an interspecies institution was never just food. It was biology, culture, hierarchy. The apex species sat in clusters like constellations, Valarians here, Carvosi reptilians there. The crystalline Lear scattered in a delicate group round temperature-controlled plates. The so-called minor species sat along the edges, careful not to intrude. Erin walked in with a tray and paused, scanning. The light gravity made the tray feel weightless, but she carried it with both hands anyway, as if practicing control. She had selected nutrient-dense foods, protein, minerals, salts because her body demanded it. On Karis 9, you did not eat for taste, you ate for function. Here, the food was engineered perfection. But Erin still found herself checking textures the way one checks for spoilage. She approached an empty seat near the center, not because she wanted attention, but because she refused to exile herself. As she set her tray down, a Valarian student slid into the seat across from her, smiling with a friendliness so practiced it felt like a trap. "Erin Vale," he said, pronouncing her name correctly. That was deliberate. "We haven't formally welcomed you." Erin sat. "Welcome accepted," she said. The Valarian's smile tightened slightly. "We're curious," he continued, leaning forward. "Is it true that on Karis 9, your people still settle disputes physically?" Several nearby students leaned in to listen. Erin took a bite of food and chewed slowly. "Sometimes," she said, "sometimes we settle them by building things together. Sometimes by talking. Sometimes by walking away. It depends on what's at stake." The Valarian tilted his head. "And what do you do when someone insults you?" Erin swallowed. "I decide if they're trying to hurt me," she said, "or trying to make themselves feel bigger. Then I respond accordingly." The Valarian's eyes gleamed. "And if they are trying to hurt you?" Erin looked at him with calm focus. "Then they should be careful," she said simply. There was a pause, and in it the Valarian's performance faltered for the first time. He had expected outrage or bravado. He had not expected a warning delivered like a weather report. That night, the real decision was made not in the open, but in the quiet corners where the Academy's social predators gathered. In the upper recreation lounge, where the lighting was soft and the viewports displayed curated starfields, a group of Valarian students sat in a loose semicircle, discussing Erin the way people discussed problems they intended to solve. "She's disrupting the balance," one said, voice smooth. "She's making the lower clusters look emboldened," another replied. "If Deathworlders start thinking they can speak like equals, we'll have a mess." A third added with mild disgust. "They did not say fear. They said mess. They did not say threat. They said disruption." The language of civilized prejudice was always sanitized. A plan formed with the same ease as gossip: isolate her, provoke her, record it, release it. Let the Academy see the Deathworlder beneath the uniform. Let the administration regret accepting Karis 9's request. Let the other species remember their place. It was not, in their minds, violence. It was correction. Arin, meanwhile, sat on her dorm bed and wrote a message she did not send. It was addressed to her mother, written in the clipped, practical style Carrion families used when communications windows were precious. Rived. "Gravity is light. Air is thin but manageable. People are polite in the way knives are polite. No immediate threats. Will continue." She stared at the final line a long time, then deleted it. No immediate threats was an assumption, and Erin had learned on Karis 9 that assumptions got people buried. She sent instead, "Rived, adapting, watching." Her mother would understand. Her mother had survived the red storms. 2. The Academy's official schedule labeled the next day as Physical Education and Species Wellness Orientation. That innocuous phrase concealed a powerful institution, the Gravity Gymnasium, a controlled chamber that could shift pressure fields and simulate environmental conditions for training and therapy. For most students, it was a place of mild exertion and social bonding. For Erin, it was the closest thing the Academy had to honesty. She entered early, before the crowds, and requested a private session. The gym's polite, neutral voice tuned to avoid triggering any species fear responses asked what settings she required. Erin considered. If she set it to Keras 9 gravity, she would draw attention. If she set it to low, she would waste time. To point to standard, she said. The AI complied. The field deepened. The floor seemed to solidify beneath her boots, and for the first time since arriving, Erin felt something familiar. Wait, not the crushing intensity of her homeworld's full gravity, but enough to remind her body of its purpose. She began with slow movement stretching, controlled squats, balance drills like someone checking the integrity of a bridge before crossing. Each motion was deliberate. Each breath was measured. She was careful, always careful, because the academy was full of fragile things, and she did not want to be the reason anything broke. She did not know, yet, that fragility was not only in materials. It was in egos, and egos, unlike glass, shattered loudly. When the doors sealed behind her with a soft mechanical hiss, Aaron's head turned immediately, not in panic, but in recognition. On Keras 9, the sound of a seal meant storms, pressure drops, predators. Here, it meant privacy, or captivity. She saw the 3 Valarians enter with relaxed confidence, their anti-grav harnesses hidden beneath their uniforms like secrets. Their leader smiled as if this were a friendly visit. "Erin," he said warmly, "training alone? That's not very cooperative." Erin did not step back. She did not step forward. She simply stood, shoulders squared, breathing steady, eyes locked on the one holding the control override. "I requested privacy," she said. The Valarian's smile widened. "We know," he replied. "That's why we came. No distractions." Aaron's gaze flicked to the panel. It glowed faintly. Not red yet, but ready. She felt the first tug of instinct, the old Keras 9 reflex that said move first. And she forced it down. Here, the first move was rarely the smartest. "What do you want?" she asked. The Valarian leader spread his hands. "Just a demonstration," he said. "Everyone's talking about you. Your strength, your strategies, your confidence." He said confidence like it was a flaw. "We thought we'd test the Deathworld myths. See if you're truly as tough as your world claims." Aaron's jaw tightened slightly. "And if I refuse?" The Valarian tilted his head. "Refuse?" he echoed, amused. "Erin, this is a school. We don't refuse. We participate." He tapped the override, and the gravity field shifted, subtle at first, then deepening like a wave rolling in. Erin felt it settle into her bones, pressing down, increasing load on her joints. 2.5, 2.8. Her muscles responded automatically, stabilizing her stance. The Valarians watched with expectation, believing they were watching the beginning of humiliation. They did not yet understand that the beginning of humiliation might belong to them. Erin exhaled slowly, her mind moving through options like a tactical simulation. Fight now, and they would call her violent. Submit, and they would call her weak. Speak, and they would twist her words. She recognized the trap not as a physical threat, but as a narrative threat. This wasn't about her body. It was about the story they wanted to tell. She had come to the academy to learn, to represent her world, to prove that Keras 9 could cooperate without being patronized. She had not come to become a cautionary tale. The gravity ticked higher. The floor pressed against her boots. The Valarian leader's eyes glinted with satisfaction. And in that moment, standing under a sky of artificial stars, surrounded by students who mistook cruelty for control, Erin made a choice. That was not about survival, but about change. She would not give them the story they wanted. She would give them a different one they could not laugh away, one that would force the academy to look at itself in a mirror it had avoided for generations. Because on a death world, you learn something that comfort children never fully grasp. Danger is not the moment you get attacked. Danger is the moment you realize the system is designed to blame you for defending yourself. And when you understand that, you don't just survive, you adapt, you evolve, you become something the system can't easily contain. The gravity climbed again, and Aaron's muscles tightened like coiled cable. She lifted her chin slightly, eyes steady, breath controlled, and waited not for permission, not for mercy, but for the precise moment when their confidence would become their mistake. That moment was coming. Chapter 2. The the gravity rose in smooth, obedient increments, as if the room itself were proud to demonstrate how easily it could turn comfort into cruelty. At 3 standard gravities, the air felt thicker, the floor more insistent, the joints more honest. At 3.5, Aaron's ribs began to argue with the compression. She could feel each breath as a small act of engineering, lungs expanding against weight as if the chamber wanted to remind her that oxygen was a privilege. The Valarians watched with controlled fascination, their faces composed into the polished masks of people who had never needed to worry about being crushed by their own planet. Their anti-grav harnesses, sleek devices that reduced effective load on their bodies, hummed at a frequency just outside the hearing range of most species, but Aaron caught it. Karis 9 trained your senses the way civilized worlds trained etiquette, relentlessly, until you could read threat in the smallest signals. The hum meant they weren't sharing the test. It meant this wasn't training, it was theater. The leader, the one with the override panel angled toward his hip like a concealed weapon, stepped closer and spoke as though he were offering encouragement. "You're doing well," he said, voice gentle enough to be recorded and replayed as kindness. "I'm impressed, truly, but you understand why we must confirm these things. The Academy values safety." The last word was almost comical in this room. With its sealed doors and rising gravity, Aaron's gaze stayed on him, steady and level. Her stance had shifted subtly, feet planted wider than necessary, knees slightly bent, spine aligned to distribute load, shoulders loose rather than rigid. It was the posture of someone lifting a collapsed beam off a trapped friend, strength without waste. "If this is about safety," she said, the words coming measured between breaths, "open the door." The Valarian smiled with a hint of regret, like a person refusing a child's request for sweets. "Not yet." He tapped the override again. "For gravities." The floor pressed into Aaron's boots until she felt the texture of every microscopic ridge. Through the reinforced soles, her quadriceps tightened. The tendons at the back of her knees protested. Her neck muscles engaged like cables holding up a heavy structure. She could still stand, but standing was now a constant negotiation. The Valarians, floating, light, elegant, circled her with the casual grace of predators who believed the prey had already fallen. One of them, a slim student with a violet sheen under his eyes, raised a compact emitter from his sleeve and fired a pulse. The blast wasn't lethal. It was calibrated to cause muscle spasms and vestibular disorientation, the kind of non-lethal discipline tools security sometimes used. It struck Aaron's shoulder and crawled across her nerves like cold lightning. Her left arm jerked, fingers splaying. Pain flared bright and clean. She bit it down instantly. Pain was familiar. Pain was information. She took a breath, exhaled slowly, and turned her head toward the shooter. "Don't do that," she said quietly, not pleading, not threatening, simply stating a fact like that stove is hot. The shooter laughed as if she had told a joke. He fired again, aiming for her legs. Aaron moved, not fast in the way the Valarians understood speed, darting and light and performative, but fast in the Deathworld way, where the body didn't waste motion and the mind didn't waste time. Under for gravities, every step cost something. But Aaron had spent her entire life paying that cost. She shifted her weight, rotated her hips, and let the pulse skim past as her knee bent deeper, absorbing weight like a spring. She reached down with her right hand, fingers closing around a heavy training disc on the floor meant for species who needed additional load under lighter gravity, and lifted it with a grunt. That was more breath control than effort. Then she didn't throw it like a weapon. She slid it across the floor, low and controlled, directly into the base of the override pedestal. The disc struck with a dull, heavy thunk that vibrated through the chamber. The pedestal rocked. The leader's eyes widened slightly, just a flicker, quickly hidden. His hand tightened on the override. "You're damaging Academy property," he said sharply, the first crack in his calm. "You're damaging Academy students," Aaron replied, and the way she said it flat, factual, made it worse than shouting. They changed tactics. The second Valarian, the one with the smoothest smile, lifted his own emitter and fired not at Aaron's muscles, but at the chamber's environmental system. A panel sparked. The lighting dipped into a harsh strobe designed to trigger nausea responses in species. With certain ocular structures, the room flickered. Aaron's vision pulsed with it, light slicing time into broken frames. The Valarians, protected by their harnesses and their biology, moved like dancers between flashes, trying to turn her senses against her. Then the third one activated a sound burst subsonic. Low-frequency vibrations meant to loosen inner ear equilibrium. It wasn't loud. It was worse. It was a crawling pressure behind the eyes, a whisper in the skull that made the world tilt. Aaron felt the tilt and did what Karis 9 had taught her. She anchored. She focused on contact points, the feel of boot soles, the pressure in her knees, the tension in her core. She chose a single fixed reference, the seam line in the floor, a straight path from her feet to the locked door. She breathed in time with the strobe, forcing rhythm into chaos, pain, flicker, tilt, wait. She labeled them as components of a problem and refused them the power of panic. The Valarians, however, mistook her controlled stillness for weakening. The leader gestured, and they closed in. One grabbed her arm. Another moved behind her, trying to hook a leg and topple her. Because the humiliation they wanted required her to fall. Under for gravities, a fall wasn't just embarrassment, it could be injury, cracked ribs, concussions. The Valarians knew that. They didn't care. Aaron felt the grip tighten, felt the subtle twist intended to force her shoulder joint out of alignment. She had a split second to choose. If she fought like a Deathworlder, she could break bones. If she fought like a civilized student, she could be broken. So she fought like something in between. Aaron rotated her wrist inward, sliding her forearm along the attacker's grip to relieve pressure, then stepped forward just enough to shift the center of mass. At the same time, she dropped her weight low. Under high gravity, lowering your center wasn't submission. It was power. The Valarian behind her attempted the leg hook and found nothing but solid stance and a sudden, brutal redistribution of force. Aaron's elbow snapped backward, not into a face, not into a throat, but into the attacker's harness control node. The strike was sharp and precise. The harness sputtered. Anti-grav assistance failed for half a second. Under for gravities, that half second felt like a hammer. The Valarian collapsed to one knee with a strangled sound, shock flashing across his perfect expression. Aaron used the moment to step out of the arm grip, twisting free without dislocating anyone, and pushed the first attacker away with her palm against his chest. She didn't shove with rage. She shoved with physics. He drifted backward, caught himself, and stared at her as if she had violated the laws of his world. "Stop," Aaron said again, louder this time. And for the first time, the chamber's sensors caught something in her voice that the Valarians could not counterfeit, the tone of someone who did not bluff. "Open the door. End it." The leader's mouth twitched, trying to return to a smile. "You're overreacting," he said, but his eyes had sharpened now, and Aaron recognized it. He was no longer playing. He was calculating. He tapped the override in a fast sequence, and the gravity spiked again. For point 5, Arn's body responded immediately. Every organ seemed to sink within her. Her stomach tightened against the pull. Her vision narrowed slightly at the edges as blood pressure shifted. She heard her own heartbeat, deep and heavy, a drum inside her ribs. The air was a weight to, pressing into her lungs. The floor was not merely beneath her now, it was claiming her. She felt her knees threaten to buckle and forced them to hold, thighs trembling, calves locked, toes gripping inside boots. Somewhere in the back of her mind, an old memory surfaced, her first storm season as a child, when her mother had taught her to brace against wind that could lift grown people. "Don't fight the world," her mother had said. "Align with it. Make it carry you, not crush you." Aaron exhaled slowly and adjusted her posture, letting her spine stack more efficiently, letting bones bear what muscles shouldn't waste energy holding. She stayed standing. The Valarians expected her to fall at 4.5 because their data did. Their research into Deathworlders came from sanitized reports and selective footage, filtered through the biases of people who needed Deathworlders to be dangerous but not capable. Aaron's survival made those biases look childish. The leader's confidence cracked further. He raised his emitter and fired directly at her face. Aaron turned her head at the last instant so the pulse hit her cheek rather than her eye. The shock washed across her jaw, numbing her teeth, leaving a burn behind her ear. It hurt. It also made something else happen. It made the decision easy. The Valarians had crossed from humiliation into harm. They were no longer trying to tell a story. They were trying to break her. Erin stepped forward, under 4.5 gravities. That step was not a casual move. It was a declaration. The floor panel beneath her boot creaked. The Valarian nearest her instinctively backed up, harness humming harder to compensate. Erin kept coming, eyes locked, breathing steady. The strobe still flickered. The subsonic vibration still crawled behind her eyes, but her body had found a rhythm that matched the cruelty, and once a Deathworlder matched rhythm, it became almost impossible to knock them out of it. The second attacker fired again, aiming for her legs. Erin didn't dodge. She caught the emitter, hand caught it, fingers wrapping around wrist and forearm with grip strength tuned by a world that wanted to tear limbs from sockets. The Valarian gasped, eyes widening in genuine fear as his bones screamed under her hold. Erin didn't crush. She didn't snap. She applied exactly enough pressure to immobilize. Then she turned his hand outward and pressed the emitter against the floor until it sparked and died. The third attacker lunged, trying to tackle her from the side, harness giving him unnatural lift despite the gravity. Erin shifted her hips, stepped into the impact, and redirected it with a shoulder roll that turned his forward momentum into a controlled crash. Against the wall padding, he hit, harness flaring, and slid down with a stunned expression, not injured severely, but stunned by the experience of real weight and real consequence. Only the leader remained standing with full confidence, because he had kept his distance, because his harness was tuned better, because he believed leadership meant never being within reach of someone you were hurting. He lifted the override and, with a sharp tap, sealed the chamber's internal emergency communications, cutting off the help button, disabling the Gym AI's ability to call security automatically. That was when Erin realized this wasn't just student cruelty. It was premeditated. It had been planned around the Academy's procedures. The leader had studied the system the way predators studied prey behavior, and Erin, in that moment, felt something colder than fear, disappointment. "You did all this," she said, voice low, "because you were embarrassed." The leader's smile returned, brittle and cruel. "Because you don't belong here," he corrected. "You don't belong among refined species. You're strong, fine. Strong animals exist everywhere, but we decide what strength means in civilization." He stepped closer, keeping the override angled, like a blade. "And if we decide Deathworld strength is unacceptable, then it becomes unacceptable." Erin stared at him, and for a brief instant the chamber's strobe caught her face in a frozen frame, eyes dark, jaw set, a thin line of blood at her cheek where the pulse had burned her skin. She looked, suddenly, exactly like what the Academy had feared, not a savage, but a survivor. Survivors weren't loud. Survivors weren't dramatic. Survivors were inevitable. "You're right," Erin said softly. ***. The leader blinked, thrown off. "Excuse me. You decide what strength means here," Erin continued, and her voice carried a strange calm that made the hair rise on the back of the Valarian's neck. "So I'm going to show you something you didn't include in your definition." She moved again, but this time not toward him. She moved toward the wall. The Valarian leader watched, confused, as Erin crossed the chamber under 4.5 gravities with controlled steps, each footfall heavy enough to make the floor vibrate. She reached the wall panel where the gym's maintenance access was concealed behind seamless composite. She placed her palm against it and closed her eyes briefly. The Valarians thought she was giving up, looking for a way out like a trapped animal. They did not understand what she was listening for: the micro-hum of electrical conduits, the faint vibration of the locking bolts, the pattern of reinforcement ribs behind the composite. Keras 9 taught you to read structures because structures failed. Buildings collapsed. Platforms snapped. People died if you didn't know where the weak points were. Erin opened her eyes and, with a single measured motion, drove her fist into the panel. It didn't explode dramatically. It didn't shatter like glass. Composite didn't behave that way. It buckled inward with a deep, ugly thump, the kind of sound that made engineers wince. The panel's seamless perfection cracked into spiderweb fractures. The Valarian leader stared, genuinely shocked. Damaging property was taboo at the Academy because it symbolized loss of control, and the Academy worshipped control. Erin hit it again, this time with her elbow, using her body weight and gravity, turning the chamber's cruelty into force. The panel caved further, exposing internal components, wiring, a manual lever, a pressure seal mechanism. What are you doing?" The leader snapped, stepping forward. Erin didn't look back. "Ending it," she said. She reached into the exposed cavity and grabbed the manual release lever designed for maintenance. Emergency's a system that bypassed the electronic locks. It required significant force under normal conditions. Under 4.5 gravities, it was worse. Erin's forearm muscles knotted. Her shoulders trembled. She braced her boots against the wall and pulled. The lever moved a centimeter, then another. The Valarian leader lunged, panic breaking through his composure. He raised his emitter, but one of his downed friends still kneeling. Harness half-failed grabbed his ankle reflexively, more out of fear than loyalty. The leader stumbled, and the pulse shot wide, striking the already damaged panel instead of Erin. Sparks erupted. The strobe flickered violently, then died. The subsonic vibration cut out with a sudden silence that felt like a held breath released. In the quieter light, Erin's face looked even more dangerous, not because it was angry, but because it was focused. She pulled again. The lever snapped down fully, with a heavy clunk. The chamber's mechanical locks disengaged. The sealed doors, still electronically commanded to stay shut, now had to obey the physical override. They hissed, shuddered, and opened a narrow gap. Air rushed in, cooler and lighter, carrying distant sounds of the academy corridor. Erin didn't relax. Narrow gaps were still traps. She stepped away from the wall and turned to face the Valarians again, breathing hard, shoulders rising and falling like a machine under strain. "Last chance," she said. "You stop. You sit down. You wait for security." The leader's face twisted, anger and humiliation mixing into something ugly. He stepped toward her, override in hand, and for the first time his voice lost its smoothness. "You think you've won because you broke a door?" He hissed. "You've proven exactly what we said you were. A brute, a vandal." He didn't finish the sentence, because Erin moved across the space in 3 steps that should have been impossible under the gravity. She didn't strike his face. She didn't aim for his throat. She grabbed his wrist, the one holding the override, and twisted it just enough. That pain forced his fingers open. The override device fell, clattering loudly against the floor. Then Erin placed her other hand against his chest and pushed him back, not into a wall, not into danger, but down. She forced him into a seated position, the way a parent might force a tantruming child into a chair. Except under 4.5 gravities, that seating felt like being pinned by the planet itself. The leader's eyes went wide as his harness struggled, and he realized what Erin had understood since the first pulse. Gravity was the ultimate equalizer, and his privilege was only possible because machines had been carrying him. Erin stepped back, keeping distance, hands open. "I didn't come here to fight," she said, voice quieter now, almost tired. "But if you make me choose between your pride and my bones, I'll choose my bones." The door gap widened as the corridor's auto systems detected the mechanical breach and attempted to cycle safety protocols. The gravity field began to drop slightly, 4.5 to 4.2, because the chamber AI regained partial control and recognized unsafe operating conditions. Erin felt relief in her muscles but didn't show it. She held position, watching the Valarians like dangerous animals who might still bite even after being cornered. Then the corridor outside erupted with footsteps and voices. Security. Not the gentle campus monitors who handled minor disputes, but actual academy security response, armored, multi-species, trained for containment. They rushed to the door as it fully cycled open and stared into the chamber with a collective shock that became visible even through their helmets. The scene in front of them didn't match the usual narratives. A Deathworld student stood at the center of the room, breathing hard, blood on her cheek. The gravity chamber's wall was fractured, panel torn open. 3 Valarian students' apex were down or pinned by high gravity, expressions ranging from stunned to furious. The leader sat on the floor as if the weight of the universe had finally reached him. None of them were dead. None of them were visibly maimed. But the room screamed violence anyway, because violence wasn't only blood. Violence was the breaking of the Academy's illusion. "Hands where we can see them," a security officer barked in standard Galactic, weapon raised. Erin raised her hands slowly, palms open, fingers spread. She did it calmly because she understood weapons and fear. "I'm not resisting," she said. "Check the logs. Check the override. They sealed me in." The security team hesitated just a fraction. They were trained not to assume, but the Academy had conditioned everyone, even security, to see Deathworlders as the likely source of escalation. Two officers moved toward Erin anyway, while others began lowering the gravity field to safe levels. As the weight reduced, the Valarians' harnesses regained control, and their bodies lifted slightly with relief. The leader scrambled to his feet, face pale with rage and humiliation. He pointed at Erin with shaking precision. "She attacked us," he said, voice regaining its smoothness like a mask snapping back into place. "We tried to help her. She went berserk. She broke the panel. She attempted to." Erin turned her head toward him, and the leader faltered because her eyes were steady, and steady eyes were difficult to lie under. "You raised gravity to 4.5, Erin said. "You used strobe, subsonics, non-lethal emitters. You cut emergency comms. You sealed the doors." She looked at the security officers. "If your logs don't show that, then your logs have been altered." The security commander, an older, heavy-set species with thick armored hide, lifted one hand. "Enough," they rumbled. "All parties will be detained. Evidence will be reviewed." The words should have been neutral, but in the Academy's social ecosystem, detained carried a certain weight depending on who you were. Valarians were rarely detained. Deathworlders were rarely given the benefit of ambiguity. Erin felt the subtle shift as other students gathered in the corridor, drawn by the commotion. They watched with wide eyes. Some looked frightened of her. Others looked fascinated. Lumo, her roommate, appeared at the edge of the crowd, feathers half raised, eyes huge with horror. Aaron's gaze met Lumo's briefly. She didn't try to comfort. She didn't try to explain. She only gave a small nod that said, "I'm alive." I stayed standing. They escorted Erin out first. That was the detail that would matter later. In the hallway, the gravity felt light again, almost insulting. Aaron's body trembled now that the immediate crisis had passed, adrenaline bleeding away. Muscles finally allowed to acknowledge strain. She kept her posture straight anyway, because she knew posture was part of narrative too. The security officers held her by the arms, not painfully, but firmly, as if she might suddenly transform into the monster in their minds. Erin let them. She could have resisted. She could have broken free. But the moment wasn't about strength. It was about the story that would be told next. And Erin had already decided she would not let Valarian pride write that story alone. As they moved down the corridor, Erin glimpsed something through a transparent wall panel, a reflection of the gravity chamber behind them. In that reflection, she saw the Valarian leader speaking rapidly to another officer, gesturing toward the broken panel with dramatic outrage. She saw students filming with private devices, capturing short clips that would spread faster than any official report. She saw the seeds of spin being planted in real time. It made her stomach tighten, not with fear of punishment, but with the bitter recognition of a system that preferred convenient truths. Karis 9 had predators that ripped flesh. The Academy had predators that ripped reputations. Both could kill you. One just did it slower. They placed Erin in a holding room that was more polite than a cell but functionally similar. Smooth walls, soft lighting, an observation window that looked one way. She sat on a bench designed for median gravity species and felt like she might float off it. Her hands were not bound, but the door was sealed. A medic arrived to scan her injuries, their expression stiff and wary. The burn on her cheek was treated with a cooling gel. Her shoulder was bruised. Her muscles showed strain patterns consistent with prolonged high-gravity load. The medic's scanner beeped at the readings and hesitated, eyes flicking up to Erin with a reluctant kind of respect. "You were under 4.5? The medic asked quietly, as if saying it aloud might make it more real. Erin nodded once. The medic swallowed. "That's beyond recommended thresholds for most species." Aaron's mouth twitched, not quite a smile. "Most species didn't grow up under a planet trying to crush them," she said. The medic didn't reply. They finished the scan and left. Time passed strangely in the holding room. Minutes felt long, then short, then long again. Erin sat with her hands clasped, breathing slowly, keeping her mind from spiraling. She replayed the incident not with regret, but with analysis. She had avoided lethal strikes. She had avoided bone breaking. She had ended the trap with minimal harm. She had forced a mechanical override rather than escalating into a brawl. She had spoken facts. She had offered a final chance. If the system was fair, the evidence would clear her. But Erin had learned long ago that systems were not fair by default. Systems were built by whoever held power, and power liked to keep its reflection flattering. Eventually. The door opened and two figures entered, the security commander and Professor Draxel. The tactical theory instructor, scarred, older, with eyes that had seen real war rather than simulated elegance. Draxel's presence was unexpected. It meant someone outside administration had insisted on being present. The commander spoke first, voice formal. "Erin Vale," they said. "You are accused of assault, vandalism, and breach of safety protocols." Erin remained seated. "I didn't seal the doors," she replied. "I didn't raise the gravity." Draxel stepped forward and set a datapad on the table. "We reviewed preliminary logs," Draxel said bluntly. "Someone tried to wipe them." Erin's pulse quickened, but she kept her face calm. "The Valarian leader had access to the override," she said. "He cut emergency comms." The commander's expression tightened. "That is what the partial logs indicate," they admitted grudgingly. "However, the Valarian students claim you initiated physical aggression." Erin leaned forward slightly. "They initiated confinement under unsafe gravity," she said. "They used emitters first. They targeted my equilibrium. They wanted me to fall." She paused, then added, quieter, "They wanted a video." Draxel's eyes narrowed. "And did they get one?" Erin's gaze lifted toward the one-way window. "Not the one they wanted," she said. "But someone filmed something. They always do." The commander made a sound that might have been frustration. "We have requested device confiscation from nearby students," they said. "It is complicated," Draxel snorted softly. "It's complicated because it's Velar Prime," Draxel muttered, not quite under their breath. The commander shot them a warning look. Draxel ignored it and turned back to Erin. "Tell me exactly what you did to disable the comms." Draxel said. "I didn't disable comms," Erin answered. "He did. I regained mechanical control by accessing maintenance release." Draxel's brow rose. "You broke the panel," they said. "I dented it," Erin corrected. "It wasn't going to open with polite requests." Draxel let out a slow breath, then nodded as if that made sense to them in a way it would never make sense to administrators. "Under 4.5, Draxel murmured, almost impressed. The commander tapped their datapad. "There's another issue," they said. "Your strength. Your capabilities. The Academy has protocols for interspecies safety. If you are capable of causing structural damage unintentionally," Erin's eyes sharpened. "I controlled myself," she said. "I didn't break anyone. I didn't kill anyone. I didn't even dislocate anyone. I could have." The last line hung in the air like a blade laid gently on a table. Not a threat, a fact. Draxel's gaze flickered with something like approval. But the commander stiffened as if threatened by the implication. "We are not here to debate hypotheticals," the commander said tightly. "We are here to determine whether you are a danger to others." Erin stared at them, and the disappointment returned, heavier now. "You should be determining whether others are a danger to me," she said, "because I'm not the one who sealed a student in a chamber and raised gravity until the floor cracked." For a moment, the commander had no response. Draxel stepped in, voice firm. "Commander, with respect, if the logs show deliberate confinement and assault, then the danger is obvious." The commander's jaw flexed. "We need complete evidence," they said. "Velar Prime has already contacted administration. They're demanding immediate disciplinary action for Deathworld aggression." Draxel's lip curled. "Of course they are." Erin sat back slowly. "So that's it," she said quietly. "They tried to break me. It failed. Now they want the system to finish the job." The room fell silent again. But this silence was different, less about shock, more about the weight of politics. The commander looked away briefly, then back, and their voice softened just a fraction. "Erin Vale," they said, I am not your enemy, but you must understand Apex influence is not trivial. The Academy can't afford truth, Aaron interrupted, not loudly, but sharply enough to cut, or can't afford embarrassment. Draxel's eyes locked onto the commander. Answer that, Draxel said. The commander's expression hardened again, retreating into professionalism. We will continue investigation, they said. Until then, you will remain here. Aaron nodded once. Fine, she said. But understand something. She leaned forward, and in her posture there was the quiet intensity of a storm front gathering. On Karis 9, when predators test the perimeter, we don't pretend the fence is fine. We reinforce it, or the next test is worse. Draxel held her gaze a long moment, then gave a small nod. The commander left, door sealing behind them with a soft hiss that now sounded, to Aaron, like the beginning of another storm. Draxel remained. They pulled up a chair and sat across from Aaron, elbows on knees, voice low. They wanted you to hit first, Draxel said. They wanted you to be what they already believe. Aaron's hands tightened together. I know, she said. Draxel watched her for a moment, then said something that made Aaron's throat tighten unexpectedly. You did well. Aaron blinked slowly. Praise was rare on Karis 9. Praise meant you survived something that should have killed you. I didn't win, she said. Draxel's expression was grim. Not yet, they agreed. But you forced the chamber open. You forced witnesses. You forced the system to notice. They paused. And that's why they'll come harder. Not with fists. With words. With policy. With safety protocols. Aaron looked down at her palms, steady now, but marked with faint bruises from pulling the lever under crushing weight. Then I'll respond accordingly, she said. Draxel stood and moved toward the door, then hesitated. There's something else, they said, voice even lower. The gym AI recovered a fragment audio, not video. A few seconds. It caught the leader's voice when he cut comms, enough to suggest intent. Aaron's eyes lifted. Is it secure? She asked. Draxel's mouth tightened. Not yet. Administration is debating proper handling. They shook their head with disgust. If they bury it, I'll make noise. But I need you to be ready, because if the truth breaks free, the Academy's image cracks. And when images crack, powerful people panic. Aaron held Draxel's gaze. Let it crack, she said. Draxel left. The door sealed again. Aaron was alone with the hum of ventilation and the soft glow of the observation window. Outside, she knew, the Academy was already transforming the event into rumors and factions. Some students would paint her as a monster. Others would secretly admire her. The Valarians would polish their story until it shone, and the administration would decide whether protecting a Deathworld girl was worth the cost of angering an Apex world. Aaron sat very still and listened to the building the way she used to listen to storms. She imagined the social pressure gathering above the Academy like clouds. She imagined the lightning of accusation, the sideways rain of politics. She felt the familiar readiness settle into her bones. Not rage, not fear, readiness, because on Karis 9, the first attack was rarely the one that killed you. The first attack was the test. The real danger came next. And somewhere beyond the holding room's one-way glass, someone with influence was already preparing to make sure the Deathworld girl didn't get the chance to stand up a second time. Chapter 3. The Trial of a Gentle Worldby. The time Aaron was released from the holding room, released, in the polite Academy sense, meaning escorted into a supervised wing. With a watcher outside her door, half the campus already believed they knew what had happened, and the other half believed they knew what should have happened. The Academy was a city of minds, but minds were not always rational, and in a place built to worship stability, the ugliest form of fear was the fear of disruption. Students didn't merely trade rumors. They traded narratives, complete with villains and lessons, because a narrative was easier to digest than a messy truth. The version spreading fastest carried by glossy, Valarian social circles and repeated by students who wanted to sound informed, painted Aaron as the obvious threat, a Deathworld brute who had snapped under pressure, injured Apex students, damaged property, and proven why Deathworlders shouldn't be integrated without strict constraints. The alternative version spoken in hushed tones by quieter species, and by those who had witnessed Aaron's restraint, was less polished, More uncertain, and therefore less viral, Erin had been trapped, provoked, attacked first. She had survived. She had refused to break them even when she could. That version did not sound satisfying to students raised on the idea that the universe was neat, that the academy was fair, that civilization always meant moral superiority. So the campus drifted toward the simpler story, because simple stories are a kind of comfort. Erin stayed calm anyway. She did what Karis 9 had trained her to do when storms gathered: secure essentials, check exits, conserve energy, observe patterns. She contacted Karis 9's liaison office through the official diplomatic channel, sending a report stripped of emotion. Incident occurred. Confined in gravity chamber. Assault initiated by Valor Prime students. Evidence partially wiped. Investigation ongoing. Request legal observer. Then she sat in the supervised wing's small study room with Lumo Savari, who had finally been allowed to visit her under wellness supervision. Lumo was trembling so badly their feathers quivered. Eyes too wide, voice too fast, apologizing as if they personally had sealed the gym doors. "I didn't know," Lumo kept saying, the words spilling out like air from a punctured balloon. "I didn't know they would, Erin. They're saying you people are saying you're—" Lumo's voice cracked, and their gaze flicked to the corridor where a security monitor stood with arms crossed. Erin listened without interrupting, letting the panic run itself out the way you let a frightened animal burn energy, before trying to calm it. Then she set a cup of warm electrolyte tea in front of Lumo and said, "Evenly, breathe." Lumo tried, failed, tried again. Erin placed her hand on the table open palm, non-threatening, and kept her voice low. "Lumo," she said, "tell me what you saw. Not what you heard. What you saw." That anchored Lumo, just a little. They swallowed, feathers settling. "I saw you in the corridor," Lumo whispered. "You were bleeding, but you weren't angry. You looked focused." Lumo hesitated, then confessed something with shame, "and I saw the Valarian leader Cass Valen talking to people. Like he was hurt, like he was the victim." Lumo's claws dug into the cup. "He was smiling, Erin. Smiling while he was saying you attacked him." Erin nodded slowly. That detail mattered not because it proved Guild Valarians smiled for everything, but because it revealed confidence. Cass believed the system would protect him. Cass believed the Academy would rather punish Erin than admit the Academy had allowed cruelty to flourish behind clean walls. Erin looked at Lumo and asked, "Did anyone film it?" Lumo's beak opened, closed. "Everyone films everything," Lumo admitted. "But security is taking devices. People are deleting things. They're scared." Arn's eyes hardened slightly. "Scared of what?" Lumo's feathers ruffled. "Of Valor Prime," they whispered. "Of being targeted. Of losing scholarships. Of being noticed." That was how control worked on gentle worlds, not with claws, but with the threat of social gravity, the invisible weight that crushed you just as surely if you didn't comply. Erin thought of the gym chamber and almost laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was familiar. Karis 9 had taught her that the environment always pressed down. Here the environment was people. The Academy administration moved quickly, but not toward clarity, toward containment. A formal inquiry was announced within 24 hours. A statement was broadcast about a regrettable incident in a training facility, an ongoing investigation into safety protocol breaches. No names were mentioned, but everyone knew. The statement emphasized interspecies harmony and preventing future escalation. The word escalation was used like a blame that could be distributed evenly, as if someone sealing a student in a chamber and raising gravity toward lethal thresholds was equivalent to that student breaking a panel to escape. Erin understood the tactic. When institutions feared consequences, they diluted accountability into vague language until responsibility disappeared. The Valarians took advantage immediately. Cass Valen's social feed, carefully curated, elegantly edited, posted a short, somber message about trauma and the importance of careful screening for students from extreme environments. His friends amplified it. Students from neutral worlds reshared it because it sounded reasonable. And the Academy, desperate to avoid political trouble, let it circulate without correction, as if misinformation were just another harmless opinion. But Draxel didn't let it sit quietly. The tactical theory professor had lived too long in real conflict to respect polished lies. Draxel began requesting access to the gym AI logs in official channels, writing messages that were blunt enough to be rude. The administration responded with delays, committees, procedural constraints. Draxel responded by filing a formal whistle complaint through the Academy's Oversight Board, a board most professors avoided because it was messy and public. A rumor spread that Draxel was risking their career. Another rumor spread that Draxel didn't care. Erin, watching the shifting currents from her supervised wing, realized something important. Draxel wasn't helping her because of sentiment. Draxel was helping her because the incident revealed something rotten in the Academy's structure, something that could get more students killed if it wasn't corrected. On Karis 9, you didn't ignore cracks. Cracks became collapse. Then the first real evidence surfaced in the ugliest way possible, not through official channels, but through leakage. It happened on a quiet cycle when students were shifting between midday lectures and lab sessions. A clip appeared on an anonymous network node used by students to trade memes and share gossip without being traced. At first it looked like any other scandal, bite grainy audio overlaying a still image of the gravity gym door. The caption read, "Valarian Safety Law." People clicked because people always clicked. The audio played, distorted slightly by distance and interference, but unmistakably Valarian in tone, smooth, theatrical, confident. Cass Valen's voice, telling someone, very clearly, disable emergency comms. She'll either fall or she'll prove what she is. Then another voice, one of the other Valarians, laughing softly. Then Cass again, colder, if she fights back, it's done. The Academy will do the rest. The clip was only seconds long. It was not a full recording. It didn't show the pulses, the strobe, the subsonics, the gravity increments. But it did something far more dangerous to Velar Prime's narrative. It revealed intent. It revealed premeditation. It revealed that the accident had been engineered, and the engineered outcome had been designed to create a scapegoat. For 12 minutes, the clip spread unchecked. Then it began to vanish, deleted by moderators, flagged by automated systems, scrubbed by campus security as unauthorized recordings. But it was too late. 12 minutes in a hyper-connected institution was eternity. Students had saved copies. Students had shared it off campus. Some had already sent it to families, to sponsors, to news feeds that watched the Academy like hawks. The clip became an ember in dry brush, and suddenly, the administration's fear shifted from how do we avoid angering Velar Prime to how do we avoid becoming a scandal across the sector. The panel chair, an elderly diplomat from a mid-tier world, leaned forward. "Erin Vale," they said gently, "why did you not simply comply and allow the situation to de-escalate?" Erin looked at them for a long moment, then answered with a question of her own. "Chair," she said, voice calm, "if someone locks you in a room and raises gravity until your bones threaten to fail, what does comply mean?" The chair blinked, unsettled. Erin continued, still calm. "On my world, we have storms that crush shelters. We teach children not to freeze because freezing gets you killed. I did not escalate. I survived." She paused, then added a line that made even the Valarian advocate's smile fade. "And I protected them even while they tried to break me, because I understood what they were trying to do, make me prove their prejudice for a moment." The hall went quiet. That quiet would have been the perfect time for the administration to reveal logs, to present full evidence, to end the matter cleanly. Instead, the panel chair cleared their throat and said the sentence Erin had feared. "The logs appear incomplete. There's evidence of tampering." The chair's eyes flicked toward the security commander. "We cannot draw definitive conclusions without full records." Cass Valen's advocate pounced. "Exactly," he said. "Without reliable logs, we must rely on eyewitness testimony. And we have 3 Apex students corroborating each other." Erin felt the social gravity press down again. The system was doing what systems did when evidence was inconvenient. It treated evidence as uncertain, and when power spoke in a unified voice, it called it credible. Then Draxel stood. The professor's presence was technically advisory, not central. But Draxel didn't care about technicalities when people were being crushed. "Chair," Draxel said, voice rough, "permission to submit recovered audio evidence." The Valarian advocate's head snapped toward Draxel. "That audio is unverified," he said sharply. "It is likely fabricated by agitators." "It should not. It's verified enough to terrify you," Draxel replied. And a ripple went through the panel, because no one spoke to Velar Prime like that. In official settings. The chair hesitated. The Karis 9 observer silent until now. A tall figure with skin like dark stone and eyes like burning coals leaned forward slightly. "We request submission," the observer said, voice deep. "If the Academy refuses, Karis 9 will interpret that as obstruction." That was not a threat dressed as politeness. That was a Deathworld speaking in diplomatic language. The chair swallowed and nodded. "Submit," they said. Draxel handed over the audio clip and a metadata package, timestamps. Signal analysis, AI recovered fragments. The panel listened. Kes Valen's face tightened as his own voice filled the hall. "Disable emergency comms." And in that moment, the mask slipped. Not fully, but enough. The Valarian advocate tried to speak, tried to reframe. But the clip was a blade with an edge the room couldn't ignore. Intent. Premeditation. A plan to force Aaron into a narrative. The chair's expression shifted from gentle to grim. "Kes Valen," the chair said, "did you disable emergency communications?" Kes's throat bobbed. He glanced at his advocate, who offered him a practice nod. Kes turned back and smiled thin, forced. "Chair," he said, "the audio is manipulated." "I would never, did you?" The chair pressed. Kes's smile trembled. A security officer entered at that exact moment, whispering urgently into the chair's ear. The chair stiffened. The hall murmured. The officer's voice was not loud, but Aaron heard the words anyway. Containment failure. Habitat Wing C. Biodome pressure drop. The Academy's perfect calm had cracked. The hearing was suspended instantly. Procedure dissolved in the face of emergency. The panel members rose, confusion spreading like ink. Security began issuing orders. Students in the corridor outside shouted questions. The Valarian advocate tried to insist on continuing the hearing, because an interrupted hearing could still be spun, but no one listened. The Academy's controlled environment had just revealed its fragility. One pressure failure could kill hundreds across mixed biomes. The gentle world was suddenly real again, and real worlds didn't wait for political convenience. Aaron stood, and her body did what it always did when crisis arrived. It became clear. Calm sharpened. Breath stabilized. She didn't look to see if she was allowed to move. She moved anyway. In the corridor, alarms pulsed in rhythmic waves. Emergency shutters began sealing sections. Students ran, some in panic, some in confusion, some frozen like prey animals who had never practiced disaster. Lumo appeared, feathers flared, gasping. "Aaron, Habitat Wing C, it's the mixed biome dome. My cousin is in there." Lumo's voice cracked on the last word. Aaron grabbed Lumo's shoulder gently. "Where is Wing C?" she demanded. Lumo pointed, barely able to think. Aaron turned and started running. Security shouted at her to stop. "Student, you are under investigation. Return." Aaron didn't stop, not because she didn't fear consequences, but because consequences meant nothing compared to lives in immediate danger. Behind her, Draxel barked something at the security team, an order or an insult, and suddenly to security. Officers followed instead of stopping her, perhaps recognizing that the Deathworld student was moving with the kind of purposeful certainty crisis required. Wing C's corridor smelled wrong, metallic and cold. The pressure drop was already pulling at doors, creating a faint whine as seals strained. Through a viewport, Aaron saw the mixed biome dome, a large habitat chamber divided into microzones, humid plant sections, dry zones, temperate areas built to allow diverse species to socialize without constant environmental strain. Now the dome's atmosphere shimmered with emergency fields, and a fracture line thin. Spiderwebbing across the upper canopy pulsed with stress. Pressure sensors flashed. A group of students clustered near an internal gate, banging and screaming. A smaller group lay on the floor, unconscious from sudden oxygen imbalance. The emergency shutters were descending, but unevenly. One segment had jammed, leaving a gap where air hissed out like a wound. "Seal breach protocol," a security officer shouted, but the dome's automated system hesitated because in mixed biomes, Sealing everything could kill species in the wrong oxygen levels. The system was trying to calculate the least harmful option. That calculation was to slow ARIN assessed in seconds. The crack line, the jammed shutter, the crowd cluster, the unconscious bodies. She looked at the nearest maintenance panel locked, of course, and then at the jammed shutter's mechanical track. Under normal circumstances, the Academy would call trained engineers. Under normal circumstances, people would wait. Under normal circumstances, the system would function. KHARIS-9 had taught Erin that normal circumstances were a myth. She grabbed a dropped emergency toolkit from the floor, likely abandoned by a panicked staff member, and sprinted toward the jammed track. The air grew thinner with every meter. Her lungs compensated automatically, pulling deeper breaths, conserving oxygen. She climbed the track support, boots finding purchase on smooth composite. A security officer shouted, "Student, that's unsafe." Erin didn't answer. She wedged the tool's pry bar into the jammed segment and leveraged her body weight. The shutter trembled. It didn't move. Erin adjusted, braced her shoulder under the track, and pushed with her legs. The shutter shifted a centimeter, then stopped. Erin heard the clip the way someone hears a distant explosion through echoes, through whispers, through Lumo's panicked chirping when they burst into the supervised wing. With a device hidden beneath their sleeve. "Erin," Lumo hissed, eyes wild. Listen to this before they wipe it." Lumo's claws shook as they played the audio. Erin listened once, then again, face unreadable. When it finished, she exhaled slowly. Her stomach didn't unclench. It tightened, not with relief, but with the understanding that evidence didn't automatically equal justice. Evidence triggered battles. Battles triggered retaliation. And retaliation, on civilized worlds, often wore the face of rules. "They'll say it's fake," Lumo whispered, voice trembling. "They'll say it's manipulated. They'll say," maybe Erin said. "But now they have to say something." She took Lumo's device gently and slid it across the table. "Keep it hidden," she instructed. "Don't share it from your main account. Don't talk about it in open channels." Lumo blinked. "Why?" Erin looked at the corridor watcher, then back at Lumo. "Because when predators lose their first plan," she said softly, "they go after witnesses." That night, Erin barely slept. Sleep on Karis-9 was a controlled surrender. You slept in shifts. You slept with alarms. You slept with one ear tuned to the environment. Here, in the Academy's perfect dorm wing, the silence itself felt unnatural, like a trap. Erin lay on her bed and listened to the hum of the building. The distant footsteps of security patrols, the occasional whisper outside her door. She replayed the audio clip in her mind and considered what the Valarians could do next. They could deny. They could intimidate. They could push for immediate disciplinary action before more evidence surfaced. They could pressure the administration through diplomatic channels. They could try to paint Erin as a dangerous influence regardless of guilt. They could attempt to remove Draxel quietly. They could target Lumo, the easiest witness to crush. Erin's jaw tightened. The more she thought, the clearer it became. This was no longer about one incident. This was about what the Academy believed civilization meant, and who was allowed to challenge that belief. The inquiry hearing was scheduled for the next cycle in the hall of a corridor room designed to look like fairness. It had curved walls of pale composite, acoustic dampeners to prevent raised voices, and a central dais where the panel sat behind a translucent barrier that made them look slightly elevated, slightly untouchable. Representatives from the Academy administration, security, and external diplomatic observers attended. Velar Prime sent a legal advocate with a smile as sharp as a scalpel. Karis-9 sent an observer too late, because distance and bureaucracy were slow but present enough to remind the Academy that Deathworlds also had power when they chose to use it. Students were not allowed in the hall, but live summaries were streamed through official channels, carefully moderated, carefully framed. As if truth needed to be filtered before it became safe, Erin entered wearing her uniform. Boots polished despite scuffs that never fully disappeared. She carried herself with the same controlled calm she had in the gym, because she knew the panel would interpret emotion as instability. The Valarian advocate rose immediately, voice smooth. "We sympathize with the challenges faced by students from extreme environments," he began. as if Erin were a malfunctioning machine. However, we must prioritize safety. The incident involved structural damage, physical aggression, and psychological trauma inflicted upon Valarian students. The advocate gestured elegantly, and Kes Valen stepped forward, cleaned up, bandaged in theatrical places, expression carefully wounded. He spoke about fear, about unpredictable violence, about how he tried to de-escalate. His eyes glistened at the right moments. He looked like a victim. Many panel members, trained to be moved by polished emotion, nodded sympathetically. Then it was Erin's turn. She didn't give a speech. She didn't perform trauma. She didn't plead. She spoke in the same tone she had used in tactical theory, precise, factual, controlled. She described the sealed doors, the gravity increments, the harness hum, the first pulse strikes, the strobe and subsonic interference. She described the cut comms and the manual override. She acknowledged the panel damage without apology. I broke the maintenance access because I was trapped under unsafe gravity and assaulted. She stated, I used minimal force against my attackers. No bones were broken. No organs damaged. No lethal strikes used. The Valarian advocate smiled faintly as if she had admitted guilt. So you admit to damaging Academy property, he said. I admit to escaping confinement. Erin replied, and the way she said it made the word confinement land like a slap.